Supervisors or managers, when did you realize you may have hired the wrong person for the job? She was older, but not so old that you would think she couldn't interact with computers. Our customer service email got backlogged, so I checked on her and found out she was printing each email, handwriting her response on it and then 2-finger typing it into the computer. She managed to turn a 3-minute task into 45 minutes of futility. Had a guy crap his pants at work, asked to go home to change real quick, which we obviously agreed to, was gone 6 hours. When he showed back up, we asked him where he had been. Had to mow my lawn. Hired a kid in his early 20s at a pizza parlor. On the first day of the job he was late. Gave him a free pass. Assumed it was a mistake. He was late for 2 weeks in a row, more than an hour late each day, so we fired him. That same day, his mom came in to complain about why he lost his job. Told her the reason. She wanted the number to corporate. Never saw them again. I thought I had got hired for weekend work as a dishwasher. Worked one weekend and showed up the next Friday. The supervisor asked where I had been the past 3 days. No one ever showed me the schedule, so I didn't know I was a no-call no-show. Asked her to empty the bin, as in, what we put used GIF kids in, because it was full, and she said frick off. I don't get paid for that. A friend of mine has been a machinist for years and is the supervisor where he works. He was interviewing a guy for a lead machinist position paying $22 HR. Interview goes well. Resume is amazing and he's at the top of the list. At the end of the interview, my friend asks him to operate some of the equipment. They go into the shop. He goes up to the machine, looks at it for a while, and my friend asks, "You have ran one of these machines before, right?" He replies, "Oh, yes, but this one is a bit different from what I'm used to." He begins looking around the machine and then gets startled, reaches into his pocket, grabs his cell phone that isn't even ringing and tells my friend, "I need to take this, be right back." The guy books it to the parking lot, gets into his car, and speeds off. My friend tried calling him a couple of times, but no answer. Hired a dishwasher, and when I asked his trainer why isn't Josh washing the pots and pans, was informed that Josh doesn't like to get his hands wet. Perfect, here's some of those stinky yellow gloves. First and foremost, I must let you know that they interviewed extremely well. They knew all of the industry jargon, the technical details of the systems we would be using, and had a killer resume. There was no doubt in my mind that this person knew what they were doing. Day 1, they're learning on the job. Pretty standard stuff, nothing out of the ordinary. Day 2, learning continues. Their trainer notes that they're taking very long bathroom breaks 2-3 times a day. I'm talking hour-long breaks. Day 3, I go to the bathroom. Someone is going at it. I mean, hardcore, beating their meat like it was the red-headed stepchild of a rented mule. They don't even pause when they hear the door. They just yell, "Occupied." Hoping that it's a medical emergency and not someone beating the maniacal ghosts out of their haunted testicles, reply, "Do I need to call an ambulance?" Alas, their reply was not to my liking. They were canned while on the can. I had an ex who totally got fired after 5 years at his job for this. He gave me a totally different story, but a co-worker was like, he literally jerked off too much. I don't typically hire for entry-level positions, but we were doing a large hiring spree, and basically any manager who was available would interview and hire entry-level people. I got a packet for a maintenance guy. Not glamorous work, but still won't just put a warm body in that position. Young guy, early 20s, comes in, seems attentive and that he wants to move up in a corporate setting. I ended up giving him a shot. About a week later, we had a toilet clogged. This guy decides instead of using a plunger or snake, both of which are in any maintenance station, the best course of action would be to throw a tennis ball in the toilet and proceed to unclog it with the help of a broom handle. I got C-said on the work order that got sent out for that one. Did not hire the guy, but was his manager. He was hired to be the delivery driver company rep for a major client, and the very first day gave their receptionist some crap and was subsequently banned from ever going back. Great, the owner loves this guy for some reason, so I can't fire him and now I have to find him something else to do. I designate him the shop helper. He tries to be witty and clever with the guys but just comes across as in butthole, so he pisses everyone in the shop off and now no one wants to work with him. Plus he's late every other day. None of this matters because the owner sees something in him. Dude ends up missing work one day without calling in to let us know. Turns out he got a DUI and spent the previous night in jail. His father called to let us know and to also beg us not to fire him. He was in his late 30s BTW. Boss loves him and so I can't let him go. After about 2 months of similar experiences he finally tells the owner he isn't cut out for this type of work and quits. During the interview, after being genuinely underwhelming throughout the whole process, when I asked him if he had any other questions about the job, he asked me what the company policy was on no show no calls, and whether or not he would get a warning before getting fired for not showing up to work, as he admitted that he had trouble getting out of bed sometimes. I begged our HR person not to hire the guy, but he was a referral from one of the managers, cousin, childhood friend, something along those lines. So we brought him on. Despite my recommendation, he lasted 5 days. Within that time he fell asleep at his desk more than once, missed at least one of his training sessions, no idea where he was, aside from not in the training room, and used our company IM to sexually harass one of the salespeople. I never felt more vindicated in my entire life when he wasn't there the following Monday. Once a co-worker and I literally begged our manager not to hire this obnoxious bee. He told us he'd already hired her. When we asked him why, it was because her butt looked great in those jeans. He also came into work after snorting OxyContin, did coke on the clock, and regularly went to his car to smoke weed. It was an optometrist's office. Bill, you are the worst manager ever. Had a guy who worked 1 day per week for us, only Saturday. Came into the office on Monday to a voicemail full of angry customers wondering why we were closed Saturday from 11 AM to 1 PM. Asked the employee what was up, said he took his car for an oil change to the shop literally across the parking lot. We were open from 10:04. The shop was open from 8:06. Instead of dropping it off and running back, which I would have been cool with, instead of dropping it off before or after work, instead of taking it for an oil change on one of the other 6 days he isn't being paid, he locked the doors on our busiest days for 2 hours to take his car in for 15 minutes worth of service. I still get spam emails from him from time to time. They are almost exclusively pregnant or Latina P. Our unexpected last paragraph. A. When he fought a guy on the side of the road and lost, he was in the work vehicle and his uniform. B. When I asked him if I was going to be wasting money taking him to get a drug test, and that he should just tell me, is weed a drug? Yes. But this is Humboldt bro. Saved some money on that kid. C. He got kicked out of one of our stores for aggressively hitting on one of the women who worked in the jewelry department, who happened to be married. To one of our co-workers. It got messy. When I found out that most of his code was pasted from a programming website, he never even took out the comments with the copyright notices. You'll be surprised of how many so-called programmers get away with that. About day 3, when I got to work and the new hire was at her desk, head in her hands, crying, asked her what was wrong and she said she just couldn't remember how to do her tasks. Later that day, her drug test came back positive, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. Hired a girl, had her watch orientation videos where it clearly states and shows how the company expects you to dress present yourself. Food industry, so hair up, no nails, no jewelry. Comes next day for her first shift with long, fake manicured nails. Send her home, tell her to come back tomorrow for her next shift with the problem fixed. Comes back the next day with, wait for it, same long nails. Told her to go home and wait until we call her, which was for her last and first check. Ugh. High schoolers. Day 1. I get a call an hour before her shift starts. She's obviously very drunk. Hi, I can't come in, I'm in country town 4 hours away and my friends have left me at a farm. That was a misjudgment on my part. That usually means they're home or at a friend's house and are trying to make up the worst circumstances to get off work while still getting a second chance. Not speaking from experience, just know how drug addicts work. It usually doesn't take long to realize you've made a mistake. One new hire started making passive-aggressive comments about his manager in an email I was copied on. I supervised college students. One did not attend a mandatory training session because his mother kept track of all of his emails and she decided it was more important for this student to come home that weekend to attend a society event. This belongs in last week's examples of helicopter parenting. On his first day of work, he brought a loaded gun and kept it in the office, just because he thought that all the other employees wanted to see it. Later that day, while assisting customers, he would randomly take his shirt off to show people his chest tattoo of intersecting AK-47s. He didn't work for us very long. I can just picture his sales pitch. Menswear is over here. Belts are on these two displays in the front, organized by length. Dress shoes are on the back wall. Watches are in that display case there. And if you're looking for some more serious hardware, lift shirt, here's where we keep the AKs. This was at a smaller pharmacy of mine. I had lunch with her before I hired her for help. She took anything that was offered for free. Free candy bowl out front. She'll go back to take some. Didn't think anything of it, as she came off okay during the interview. My pharmacist was reporting some codeine syrup missing during our narcotic reconciliations, so I upped the frequency of the reconciliations. Found out the girl was stealing the syrup. It hasn't even been 3 months since we brought her in. Hindsight's 20/20. It's so obvious now. I could use some of that syrup right about now. I hate colds. Hired a kid from New York to quick fill a position in my shop. Nice kid, weird schedule, but did well. Only problem was that he had previously worked for an ice cream shop in New York. I guess there was a rule out there that you had to know the calorie count of every flavor and you had to give that information to the customers. So every time someone would ask about a flavor, he would answer with the standard information along with a calorie count. As a business selling overpriced fattening treats, this was not the best move. I mean, we totally would give nutritional information to customers if they asked for it, but we didn't volunteer just how bad the stuff was for you on a regular basis. Nice kid though, worked with us for a semester, then moved back to New York. When he ran into our little fast food joint's back room with the police close behind, turns out he was selling more than burgers from behind the counter. I'm surprised the police were able to catch up to him, what with such a clever escape plan. However did the police manage to foil that? I left a job in April and was responsible for hiring and training my replacement. I 100% hired the wrong person. For the first 6 months I would get constant phone calls and messages asking me how to do very simple tasks that I know for sure I trained her on and left her with detailed instructions, or who within the company she should contact about various things. It finally stopped when, after spending nearly half a day on the phone trying to help her set up an online promotion that I knew I had left a handbook on, well, she said the handbook didn't make sense. It's how I learned. I had no help otherwise. I just used the instructions given to me. If I can do it, so can she. So after that I, half jokingly, told my ex-boss that I was going to start sending invoices for my time spent helping. I know I was way too nice and should have just said no, but I left them in an extremely crappy situation and the timing of my leaving was awful. I loved the people there and I felt guilty, so I did my best to help her if when I could. I still meet a few people from that job for drinks now and then, and the first 40 minutes of any time spent together is ranting about the new hire and how she sucks. It's not even that she's bad at the tasks, it's that she literally doesn't do anything. She watches Netflix and makeup videos all day and complains when anyone asks her to do any real work. She was so sweet when I was training her, and was so eager to do the work. I don't know what happened. The last sentence is the difference between enthusiasm and discipline. It's really easy for people to become enthused about a new opportunity and give their all, but eventually the enthusiasm wears off. If they're not disciplined, they'll start slacking at that point. Not someone I hired, but someone who was there when I was hired as manager. Gave him a task, automate a set of tests, let him set the date he would have it done, and I set up a meeting for him to demo the running tests on the date he specified. At that meeting he decided to turn in his resignation instead. At least he saved me the bother of firing him. When I worked at a big lotted retail store, the only people that were willing to do the work for such a low rate of pay were doing it to uphold a drug habit. Many people I interviewed had a clear problem with drug abuse. I wrote off one guy as unhireable and he was hired anyway simply because they needed the bodies for the truckload. He stole so much. People wouldn't show up or argue with directions. Irrational behavior all around. It's sort of a crisis really. I mean, no work is getting done. After 3 months, one of which was a full month of intensive training, and despite their resume claiming 2 years of relevant experience, he kept asking the kind of amateur questions one would ask after googling a topic for the first time. Picture a doctor asking, why don't we just use antibiotics to kill the HIV virus in infected patients? After cramming enough information to his short memory chamber, and since his incompetence was mixed with very high confidence, he would hijack team meetings with completely incorrect statements and conclusions. Despite having the theoretical aspect memorized, he could not for the life of him analyze and reconstruct that information properly to reach the right conclusion. It became frustrating to the point of rage tears, having to answer infantile question after infantile question, and I was embarrassed to have him in meetings because, as my direct report, I felt second-hand embarrassment on his unfazed behalf. It got so bad that I decided to look into his background resume closely, and what do you know? It turns out was shoved into the final candidates pool from someone higher up, and his entire experience was exaggerated to the point of fabrication. Because of his significant connection, it would be an uphill battle to try and fire him or open that can of worms with HR, but he mercifully asked to be transferred to another department within the company because he could absolutely not handle the responsibilities of his position. It still makes me angry to think that someone capable and deserving of the job didn't get it because the privileged imbecile was dating the right person. Ugh. That pisses me off. Someone who has been job hunting for months for a good job can't seem to catch a break, and then people like that get jobs. Missing half their scheduled shifts, then comes in for the holiday party and hasn't shown up as of yet. But little does he know he has a surprise for when gets back. Easiest job ever. I just ask you show up on time and be mindful of your hours. I'll take their job if they apparently don't want it. I was training a new hire and spent the first 2 days sitting at her desk. I literally spent an hour at my desk each day. That's it. On the third day, I had some major projects that needed my attention. I set the new hire on a repetitive task that we had gone over the day before. I told her that I needed to get these projects done, but to come to me if she had any questions. At the end of the day, she quit because she felt like I had abandoned her. Even though I sat with her for 12 hours, babysit her as she did the very repetitive task assigned to her, confirmed she knew what she was doing, let her know to come get help if she needed it, and I checked in on her. I realized while reading her resignation that she was the wrong person. This next one wasn't someone I hired, but rather upper management assigned to me, and I couldn't get rid of her. Long story short, I needed a new assistant, interviewed, selected and hired someone perfect. They showed up for 1 day and bounced. Had to wait a couple of weeks before opening the position back up, and upper management gave me someone. I had no say in the selection of this employee. She was another manager's assistant and had worked for the company years beforehand in the same position. She transfers to my team and I train her. She was okay, a little loud and gossipy for my taste, but I needed an assistant. About a month into the job, I realized that she was a horrible assistant. Some tasks were only done once a month and she would completely forget how to do something. Despite taking notes and having a note database set up for her, which included screenshots, she wouldn't check her notes, and even when she did, she couldn't read her own handwriting. This resulted in retraining over and over again, and it was such a waste of time. The tasks she would spend her time on was supposed to be stuff she was to delegate, and she would ignore the stuff of her actual job. Our clients were remote and most of our correspondence was done via email. You know how teenagers often use shorthand while texting? She typed like that to clients. Our clients were doctors. This was the epitome of professionalism, in my opinion. Thankfully, I left the company and she was someone else's problem. Also thankfully, I had friends at the company and I found out that my replacement ended up doing her job for her and covering her butt. This went on for a year before she sent an inappropriate email to a client. Not a supervisor manager, but the clinic I used to work for hired a new medical assistant. She apparently was fired from the clinic back in 2007 and they didn't know who she was because she used her maiden name on the application. Also, the staff was almost completely different back then. When I created her user accounts to Windows and the medical software, we use her SSN for that and she didn't come up at all, but I guess back then we didn't require SSNs to keep track of people in the medical record software. The HR director recognized her and asked, "How do you get your job back?" And the medical assistant kind of played it off like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So the HR director talked to the medical department manager and they put everything together and fired her again by lunch. Was showing a girl how to fill the ice bins and she looked shocked and said, "I think that's more of a boy's job. B, you're working in a concession stand." Super sweet girl, probably fairly competent, but then on like day 4 realized she diehard believed in ghosts. To the point she wasn't responsible for things cause it was the ghosts. It was all downhill from there. Just once I'd like to be 100% dysfunctional as a human being at the workplace. Just once. Just to see what would happen. Failing to pick up basic tasks, not handling constructive criticism well, not putting in the effort to learn, grow, not showing a commitment to the job team. It becomes pretty obvious pretty quick. When we asked her to move her truck from a spot reserved for the non-profit organization in our building, so she parked in a clearly marked handicap space instead. During her first week, she started joking how people always lie on their job application when they say they like working in a fast-paced environment. We were a startup. She also established that she'll never come on time because she's a naturally late person. In my experience, fast-paced work environment means crap planning, crap management and dumping it on the non-managers to get it done on time. So yeah, if you see anyone saying they like that, they are either a manager or lying. He pulled me to one side and showed me all the titties he was getting on Skype from his honeys back in India. Fired a day or 2 later. Hired a guy. Seemed nice. Knew the skills well. Other guys in the shop liked him in the interview. First day on the job he starts arguing with me about the stuff I ask him to do and how it is done. Warn him I have decades of experience more and to do the job. Day 2 he is doing the work for another shop in the company. Tell him to quit it and focus on our work. Day 4 find out from the other shop's manager that he is still interfering with their work. Have a talk with him. Hand him a piece of equipment and told him exactly what he needed to do. Day 6. After sitting at his computer with headphones on for 2 days, go by and ask him how it is going with what I gave him. He hands it back to me and tells me to do it myself. Yeah, there was number 7th day. When he faked his own death after the first week, to avoid just quitting like a normal person. I saw him at the bank today. Oh, please elaborate on the fake death. I got put in charge of a chain of cigar stores. It'd been an employee and worked in one, not the other. In the rush of me getting promoted to a position in retrospect I was not prepared for. I got there but it was a rocky start. I rubber-stamped 2 hires vouched for by the other store's manager. The other place was a shit show and the owner wanted me a little hands off with them just to let the store manager succeed or fail on his own. Not my problem. Owner said. Like I said, it was a shit show. After I left, they'd behaved pretty well for a while. Just generally dumb and lazy. They got fired by my replacement. Great dude. I hired him and it was the smartest thing I did for that place. Because while in the store during business hours they were tripping too hard on acid to use the cash register computer. This makes sense if you have looked at an LCD screen on hallucinogens. I regret having hired them. My brain read LSD screen. I've got a few, but one stands out more than the rest. But the sad thing is that none of them were my hires. All were hired by my superiors. The one that immediately stands out. The girl started drawing coloring with crayons that she brought in, as I am trying to train her on like her 3rd day. It was a pretty detailed topless anime type character. The girl was quite skilled at art. But then, when I asked her to stop, she stopped for about 20 minutes and then starts coloring again. Luckily she didn't last much past that. I've been in management for over 20 years. I've seen it all. One guy sticks out though. I hired the guy because he interviewed well and had the right experience. He was already forklift certified but he recerted his first week at my company. The very next day I walk out of the warehouse and I see him jump off the forklift. It is still rolling and he running after a work order that blew off the lift. He then runs back, jumps on and keeps going. I asked him to park. wrote him up and fired him later that day. I then purchased a new forklift that when your butt comes off the seat the lift shuts down. Good for you. My husband works in manufacturing and these sort of dickheads put everyone's life at risk, but they don't think it's a big deal. Thanks for being a good boss for the sake of the rest of your staff and their families. Well, I wasn't the one who hired him, but I was his supervisor. He was a weird kid and definitely not one I'd have picked. He printed out a sad panda meme and left it on a server wall reprimanding IT for their choice of passwords. After I had a talk with him about that, I figured he'd gotten the message. But then he showed up to work with a knife hanging around his neck, and a coworker told me about how this guy apparently wired a shotgun to his front door because Antifa was coming for him. Then we found a series of holes in the lobby wall that matched up with our office key ring, suggesting he was tossing them at the wall. By that point I was done with him. I called up our manager and asked him to be removed. The next night the kid sends out a drunk and politically charged tinfoil hat text to over a dozen people including myself. Next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call from one of the other numbers in that chain saying how the guy brought a 3 feet long machete to work one day at his old job. I also reported that up the chain. Haven't seen him since, and good riddance. This is why I prefer to interview my own people. Haven't seen him since and good riddance. Sounds like Antifa finally got to him. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.